Hello, everyone. This is Rick Pidcock, and I'd like to talk with you about an article that I wrote this past week for Baptist News Global, and it's titled "Now Pastor Greg Locke is a Demon Slayer." It was published on March 14th, 2023, and it was about the new documentary that's being published by Greg Locke, who is a famous pastor, and he was very heavily involved with the January 6th insurrection and fueling a lot of the outrage that led to that. And so now he's created this documentary where he is basically joined up with these charismatics, even despite the fact that he's from a Baptist background, and they are focusing on slaying demons is the words that they use. And so I think it's easy for many of us when we see someone like Greg Locke to see him as this cartoonish character, because he kind of is. And and yet, and I think it's healthy in a sense to understand that, but it's also important for us to not only be aware of the very real power that he holds in American religion and politics, but also to read stories like the one I wrote with some self-reflection about self-awareness. And the reason why is that even though many evangelicals will not resonate with Greg Locke, it's still pretty standard evangelical theology to believe in spiritual warfare, to believe in demons that actually affect our lives, to in many cases dismiss issues of mental health. And there's a lot of problems with how evangelicals talk about sexual abuse, much like Greg Locke and the guys he's with have. And then they also, evangelicals, invoke language about crucifying the flesh that also disembody people. And so these are all things that I pointed out in the story about Greg Locke that are very common in evangelicalism beyond just the cartoonish character of Greg Locke. And I think from an outsider's perspective, if I were to evaluate evangelical language, I think it's gotten to a place, and I know this may sound a bit harsh, but I think it's gotten to a place where it's no longer spiritually healthy for evangelicals to talk about spiritual warfare. And that may be shocking because it's in the Bible. And so we think, well, we've got to, evangelicals think you've got to live out the Bible and you've got to use the language of the Bible and obey the Bible. And if the Bible talks about spiritual warfare, then it must be important to your life. But I don't think that the evangelicals that talk about spiritual warfare, uh, they tend not to be mature enough to be able to handle it without wielding power over others and without scaring people. And you notice that in a lot of the insurrection talk, it's all people scaring others and getting people all whipped up into this spiritual warfare language, where they do talk about the battle of the spiritual forces, but it's through the political leaders. And so it's really, they say we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, but it's the demons controlling the flesh and blood, so the lines get blurred. And so there doesn't seem to be a spiritual maturity to be able to handle talking about spiritual warfare. And those who do seem mature enough to talk about it don't seem to be able to do so in a way that shows me how it brings any real meaningful addition to their lives. And in specifically, like if you're struggling in your relationship with your partner or a kid or a parent or a friend or a coworker, what does adding a demon to the conversation bring that simply working on your relationship wouldn't have? It doesn't it doesn't uh it doesn't make sense to me. And to be clear, I do believe that everything is spiritual. And yet the way we talk about those realities, those spiritual realities that we're living, even in the Bible, it's through metaphor. It's there aren't literal sword fighting demons going around, and we're not literally wearing a shield. So we're talking about metaphor here, and when we're naming the spiritual uh, dimension to reality. And so I think maybe it's time for us to embrace some new metaphors, to explore some new metaphors that could foster healthy relationship rather than harm. And and so when you read my article, read it as, yes, a growing awareness of the power dynamics that Greg Locke and others like him wield over others, but also read it as a reflection for self-awareness, specifically about the metaphors we use and how those metaphors can either disembody us or can bring embodied healing.